Welcome to Echoes of Ihsan, where we dive deep into Islamic texts that you, the listeners, provide to us.
That's right.
And today,
Yeah.
we're looking at something that a lot of you have asked for, which is Islamic prayer, or Salat.
Yeah, that's a big one.
It is a big one, and you've given us a really fascinating set of selections from Sunan al Tirmidhi, Volume 1, the chapters on purification, and the chapters on Salat.
Mm-hmm.
So let's dive in and see what kind of details and guidance we can uncover from these teachings.
I think it's fascinating, these practices that have been passed down for centuries and how much meaning they still hold for Muslims today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's like holding a thread that connects us back to the earliest days of Islam.
Right.
Now, before we even get to prayer itself, our source material starts with purification.
Yeah.
Could you maybe explain why that's so important?
Well, in Islam, ritual purity is essential before prayer.
Okay.
It's a way of preparing yourself both physically and spiritually for communicating with God. Think of it like clearing your mind and creating a sacred space before you engage in that communication.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like setting aside the noise of the world so you can really focus.
Exactly.
So the text starts with wudu.
Okay.
What exactly does that involve?
So wudu, or ablution, is a step-by-step washing. It's very precise.
Okay.
You wash your hands, you rinse your mouth and nose, you wipe your head, you wash your feet.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like a choreography of cleansing.
It does seem like more than just getting clean.
Right.
Is there a deeper meaning to all of these actions?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Each step symbolizes purifying not just the body, but also our intentions.
Okay.
Imagine washing away the distractions of the day, preparing yourself for a fresh encounter with the divine.
I like that image.
Yeah.
It's like hitting reset, before you're stepping into this sacred space.
Mm-hmm.
Now, speaking of the details,
Mm-hmm.
the text mentions being careful to wash the heels.
Yep.
Why the emphasis on that?
Well, there's a hadith that emphasizes this, that warns about the fire on the day of judgment.
Okay.
It's a very powerful image to highlight the need for thoroughness,
Wow.
even in seemingly small aspects of purification.
Yeah, that is a vivid reminder to pay attention.
Right.
Even to the smallest details.
Even to the smallest details.
Yeah. It seems like these rituals are meant to be performed, with intention.
Mm-hmm.
You're not just going through the motions.
Yeah, exactly.
The text also mentions a debate about whether wudu is needed after intimacy with one's spouse.
Oh, interesting.
What was that all about?
Well, it's a great example of how even seemingly minor aspects of practice were debated by scholars.
Okay.
Some argued that intimacy necessitates a renewed state of purity before prayer,
Okay.
while others believed that simple touch doesn't break wudu, emphasizing practicality in daily life.
So it's about finding that balance.
Exact.
Staying true to the spirit of the rituals, but not making them overly burdensome. Yeah. And I find it fascinating how these debates show that Islamic thought has evolved over time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, besides wudu, the text mentions ghusl,
Right.
which is a full body bath.
Yes.
When is that required?
Goose is required for major impurity, so after intimacy, menstruation, or childbirth.
Okay.
And it involves a specific order that's actually outlined in hadith
Okay.
from the Prophet's wife, Maimuna.
Okay.
And you basically wash the whole body 3 times, starting with the head and the right side, then the left.
Okay, so it's a more complete purification.
Yes, a more complete purification.
Now, the text uses this phrase, water is for water. What does that mean?
Well, it's a poetic way of saying that ghusl, which uses flowing water, is needed after events, like intimacy, which also involve a release of fluids.
Okay.
So purification follows the cause of impurity.
That's a profound way of putting it. It's like this symbolic cleansing,
Right.
resetting your spiritual state. Now, beyond the rituals themselves,
Yeah.
the text also touches upon just general purity.
Mm-hmm.
What stood out to you there?
Well, there's a hadith about not facing the qibla,
Okay.
the direction of prayer, while relieving oneself.
Okay.
And it emphasizes respect even in private moments.
Interesting.
Islam extends its teachings to every aspect of life.
Yeah, it's a reminder that awareness of God
Mhm.
is meant to be constant.
Mm.
It's not just during formal prayer times.
Exactly.
That's a beautiful thing. I also found the mention of the siwak interesting.
Yes.
What was that about?
So a siwak is a teeth cleaning twig. It's like an early toothbrush.
Okay.
And the text describes a companion who always had his ready, showcasing the dedication of the early Muslims to cleanliness. It
Mhm.
wasn't just a rule for them, it was a way of life.
It paints such a vivid picture of their commitment.
Right.
So we've covered this foundation of purification,
Mm-hmm.
preparing ourselves for the main event, Salat, the Islamic prayer.
Right.
So what can you tell us about this core practice?
So Salat is the second pillar of Islam, right after declaring faith.
Okay.
It's really the cornerstone of a Muslim's connection with God.
Mm-hmm.
5 times a day, at specific times, we turn to him in this special way.
5 times. I've always wondered why those specific times.
Well, these times were divinely ordained. They were revealed to the Prophet Muhammad during his miraculous night journey,
Okay.
the Isra and Miraj.
Wow.
Imagine him ascending through the heavens, receiving instructions from God himself.
That journey is such a powerful symbol of spiritual ascension.
Mm-hmm.
And these 5 daily prayers, Fajr, Zuhr, Asr, Maghrib, and Isha, they're fixed.
Right.
They're unchanging.
Yes.
It is a commitment. But there's also a story about those prayers being fewer than initially intended.
Yes, initially 50 prayers were mandated.
Wow, 50.
But through the Prophet's pleas, God mercifully reduced them to 5.
Okay.
It shows God's understanding of human limitations.
Yeah.
Islam is demanding, but it's also rooted in compassion.
It's reassuring to know that even the Prophet, had to advocate for some ease and balance within the faith.
Absolutely.
Speaking of a balance, our text highlights praying in congregation.
Okay.
Why is that so important?
Well, praying together fosters unity. It strengthens those community bonds.
Okay.
It reminds us that we're all standing before God as equals.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, there's a story about the Prophet choosing a human caller for prayer instead of a bell or a horn.
Oh, I'm curious about that. What happened?
So he chose Bilal, a freed slave, to call the adhan with his powerful voice.
Oh, okay.
This showed that in Islam, piety matters more than social status. Everyone's voice is heard in the eyes of God.
That's such a powerful statement about equality within the faith.
Absolutely.
So we have these designated times.
Right.
We gather together. And what actually happens during prayer?
So each prayer consists of units called rak'ah.
Okay.
You stand, you bow, you prostrate, you sit. It's a sequence of movements that express humility, submission, glorification of God.
Yeah.
It's almost like a physical conversation with the divine.
It sounds like a beautiful dance filled with meaning.
Mm-hmm.
Can you break down some of those postures?
Sure.
And what they represent?
So imagine standing upright, hands raised, acknowledging God's greatness.
Okay.
Then you bow, or ruku, with your hands on your knees, symbolizing humility. Prostration, or sujud, is the ultimate surrender, where your forehead, the noblest part of your body, touches the ground in total submission.
Wow. So each movement really has such a profound meaning.
It does.
It's not just, going through the motions. It's about expressing your inner state through your body.
Exactly.
Are there any specific guidelines about these postures that are mentioned in the text?
Absolutely.
Oh,
So,
okay.
for example, it's disliked to form rows between columns during congregational prayer.
Okay.
This emphasizes order and unity,
Interesting.
maintaining this seamless flow of worship.
Mm-hmm.
There's also an emphasis on stillness and focus during bowing and prostration.
Yeah.
Really shutting out distractions and immersing yourself in that moment of connection.
It's like trying to get rid of all the noise, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just be present in that moment.
Yes.
What about speaking during prayer? Is that allowed?
Well, interestingly enough, initially talking was allowed, but later God revealed a command for silence during prayer.
Okay.
It shows how practices can evolve, guided by revelation.
Yeah.
And this emphasizes the inner focus needed during prayer.
So it's not just about the physical actions.
Right.
It's about, quieting the mind and truly being present with God.
Exactly.
The text mentions a beautiful hadith about that, right?
It does. The prophet said, "My eyes sleep, but my heart does not."
Hmm.
And this highlights the importance of mental presence during prayer,
Yeah.
connecting with God beyond just the physical actions.
Okay.
It's about reaching a state of Ihsan, striving for excellence in worship as if you see God, or knowing that he sees you.
That's a beautiful concept.
It is.
It's like bringing that awareness and sincerity to every moment of the prayer.
Mm-hmm.
But the text also acknowledges our humanness.
Right.
What happens if you get sleepy during prayer?
The text actually advises stopping and sleeping.
Really?
It's a very compassionate ruling,
Wow.
recognizing that sometimes our bodies need rest.
Yeah.
So it's about finding that balance,
Yeah.
striving for that connection with God without pushing ourselves beyond our limits.
That's reassuring.
Mm-hmm.
It shows that Islam is practical. It acknowledges the realities of being human.
Yes.
So we've explored these core elements of the prayer,
Mm-hmm.
but there's also the concept of voluntary prayers,
Right.
right? The text mentions nafil prayers.
Yes.
Tell us about those.
So these are extra prayers that are performed out of love and devotion.
Yeah.
They go beyond those obligatory 5. It's like saying, I want to spend even more time with God.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Showing that, that desire for closeness.
Mm-hmm.
So can you give us some examples of these voluntary prayers?
Certainly.
Yeah.
So the text mentions 2 rak'ah before Fajr,
Hmm.
which is a highly rewarding prayer.
Okay.
But what's interesting is you can even pray them after sunrise if you miss them,
Oh.
showing that flexibility.
Interesting.
There's also the witr prayer performed at night, and there are actually different opinions noted on the number of rak'ah for this prayer.
Okay, so even in voluntary prayer, there's room for for interpretation
Yes.
and for individual understanding.
Exactly.
It's not about rigid rules, but about that genuine desire to connect with God.
Exactly.
What else did the prophet encourage regarding these extra prayers?
Well, he emphasized praying as much as one can bear without making it a burden. It reflects that balance that Islam promotes, striving for spiritual growth without neglecting your worldly responsibilities.
It's a beautiful reminder that faith should should enrich our lives. It shouldn't overwhelm us.
Right.
So we've covered daily prayers, voluntary prayers. Are there special congregational prayers?
Yes, there are.
Okay, like Friday prayer and the Eid prayers.
Yes, Friday prayer and the 2 Eid prayers.
Okay, what can you tell us about those?
So these are occasions where the Muslim community comes together for a heightened experience of communal worship
Okay.
and celebration. So Friday prayer or Jumu'ah is a weekly gathering, while the Eid prayers mark the 2 major festivals in Islam.
Okay, let's start with Friday prayer. What are some of the key points that the text highlights about this special prayer?
Well, it emphasizes the recommendation of ghusl, the full ritual bath, before Friday prayer.
Okay.
It's like stepping into this communal gathering in a heightened state of purity.
Mm-hmm.
And there's actually a story about Umar, the second caliph, correcting someone who had only performed wudu before Friday prayer.
It shows how seriously they took this, this preparation.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
understood the significance of Friday prayer as this unique event.
Exactly.
What else stood out to you about the rulings on Friday prayer?
Well, the text forbids buying and selling in the mosque during the khutbah, the sermon.
Okay.
It's about respecting the mosque as a sacred space,
Okay.
dedicated to worship and spiritual reflection.
Hmm.
Worldly matters are set aside during this time.
Yeah, it creates that clear separation, right?
Mm-hmm.
A time and place dedicated solely to God.
Exactly.
Now, what about the Eid prayers?
Okay.
What insights did you find in the text about those celebrations?
So the Eid prayers mark joyous occasions.
Okay.
Eid al-Fitr, celebrating the end of Ramadan,
Mm-hmm.
and Eid al-Adha, commemorating Prophet Abraham's willingness to sacrifice his son. And the text actually mentions a detail about the Prophet returning from Eid prayer by a different route than he came.
Oh, that's interesting. Why do you think he did that?
I think it symbolizes avoiding stagnation,
Okay.
always seeking new paths in our spiritual journey.
Okay.
Even in celebration, there's a reminder to keep growing and evolving in our faith.
That's a beautiful reminder that that learning and growth should never stop.
Right.
So we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
Purification, the daily prayers, voluntary prayers,
Mm-hmm.
and special congregational prayers.
Mm-hmm.
What stands out to you from all of this?
Well, what fascinates me is how these teachings are both deeply spiritual and incredibly practical.
Mm.
They address both our interconnection with God and the details of daily life.
Yeah, I agree. It's a holistic approach to faith.
Mm-hmm.
Every action, even something as simple as washing your hands,
Right.
can be an act of worship.
Absolutely, and it's inspiring to see how these practices have been passed down for centuries.
Yeah,
Connecting us to this rich tradition of faith.
absolutely. But as we move into the next part of our deep dive, I'm curious to hear more about your own journey with prayer.
Okay.
What have been some of your personal experiences or insights?
That's a great question. Let's delve into that in part 2. I think back to when I first started learning about prayer as a child, and it was all about memorizing the movements and the recitations.
Mm-hmm.
But as I grew older, my understanding really deepened.
It's like anything, right? The more you learn, the more you realize there's so much more to discover.
Absolutely.
So what were some of those key turning points for you
Mm-hmm.
in understanding prayer?
One of the most profound realizations for me was the importance of khushu,
Okay.
that deep concentration and presence of heart during prayer.
Yeah.
It's about going beyond simply reciting the words
Mm-hmm.
and truly connecting with their meaning, feeling God's presence.
It's like shifting from a routine to a real conversation, right?
Exactly.
I remember struggling with that myself.
Mm-hmm.
It's so easy to get distracted, especially in our busy modern lives.
Absolutely.
And our text actually talks about distractions, doesn't it?
It does. It acknowledges that distractions are inevitable,
Okay.
but it encourages us to fight for that focus.
Okay.
Finding a quiet place, closing your eyes,
Mhm.
really pondering the words that you're saying.
Yeah.
And even if your mind wanders, you gently bring it back.
Okay.
It's a practice, like training a muscle.
That makes me feel better.
Yeah.
Knowing that
Yeah.
it's something that everyone struggles with.
Absolutely.
It's a reminder that prayer is a journey, not a destination, right?
Right.
It's not about achieving perfect concentration every time,
Right.
but it's about constantly striving.
Yeah.
What are some other things that you've learned along the way?
Something that really struck me later on was the beauty and power of supplication,
Mm-hmm.
dua.
Yeah.
It's like taking all your worries, your hopes, your dreams directly to God.
Yeah.
And the text encourages us to ask for both our worldly needs and for spiritual guidance.
Okay.
It's a reminder that God is the source of all good, and we can turn to him for anything.
I love that. It's like opening this direct line of communication, right?
Exactly.
With the divine. But I've also heard, different opinions on when and how to make dua during prayer.
Mm-hmm.
So what's your understanding of that?
Well, there are various opinions.
Acceptable.
This reflects the richness of Islamic scholarship.
Okay.
Some scholars believe that dua should be made at specific points in the prayer,
Okay.
while others say it can be incorporated throughout.
Okay.
Ultimately, I think the most important thing is the sincerity of your heart.
Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about following a rigid formula,
Right.
but about that genuine connection with God.
Exactly.
Speaking of connection, the text mentions praying for others.
Yes.
Why is that encouraged?
Well, praying for others is a beautiful expression of love and compassion.
Mm-hmm.
It's a selfless act.
Yeah.
It extends our concern beyond ourselves
Yeah.
to include the well-being of others.
Okay.
Imagine sending positive energy and blessings and support to your loved ones through your prayers.
That's a powerful image, and it's not just limited to people we're close to, right?
Right.
The text encourages praying even for our enemies.
Yes.
Why would we do that?
Praying for those who have wronged us is really a testament to our faith
Okay.
and our commitment to forgiveness.
Okay.
It's about releasing that anger and resentment and surrendering those feelings to God.
Oh,
It
wow.
doesn't mean condoning their actions, but choosing to rise above that negativity.
Yeah, it's a powerful way to cultivate inner peace, even in the face of difficult situations.
Absolutely.
It's like choosing love over hate, right?
Right.
Even when it's hard.
Even when it's hard.
Our our source material from Sunan al Tirmidhi,
Mm-hmm.
it's filled with these profound reminders, but it also delves into very specific rulings.
It does.
So, what are your thoughts on navigating those details?
Well, I think it's important to remember that those rulings are meant to guide us,
Okay.
not to burden us.
Okay.
They provide a framework for performing the prayer correctly, with respect and reverence.
Okay.
But I can see how sometimes those details can feel overwhelming,
Yeah,
especially for someone new to the practice.
I agree. It's like learning a new language.
Mm-hmm.
You need to
Yeah.
you need to master the basics before you can before you can appreciate the poetry.
Exactly.
So, what advice would you give someone who might be feeling intimidated by all the rules?
I would say start with the basics.
Okay.
Focus on developing consistency. And don't be afraid to ask questions.
Okay.
Seek guidance from knowledgeable scholars or teachers who can help you understand the why behind the what.
Okay.
And remember, the most important thing is the sincerity of your heart.
Okay.
God sees your effort and your intention, and that's what truly matters.
That's such a reassuring message.
Yeah.
It's about progress, not perfection.
Exactly.
And speaking of progress, I'm curious about your personal, prayer routine. Have you always been consistent?
Honestly, no.
Okay.
Like many people, I've had phases where I was more disciplined than others. Life throws curveballs.
It does.
And sometimes maintaining that consistency can be a struggle.
Yeah.
But what's helped me is realizing that even if I miss a prayer or I feel distracted during prayer, it doesn't negate the entire practice.
Okay.
I just try to get back on track as soon as possible.
That's relatable. That's a reminder that we're human. We're not going to be perfect all the time.
Exactly.
But we can always strive to do better.
Absolutely.
The text actually mentions missing prayers, doesn't it?
It does.
Okay.
Islam emphasizes the importance of praying on time,
Mm-hmm.
but it also recognizes that sometimes we miss a prayer for valid reasons.
Okay.
Illness, sleep, forgetfulness. The key is to make it up as soon as you remember, or as soon as you're able to.
Okay.
It's about fulfilling that duty to God even when we fall short.
It's like a safety net,
Right.
knowing that that there's always a way to make amends and to get back on track.
Absolutely.
That's reassuring. Now, aside from missing prayers, are there other things that can affect the validity of our prayer?
Yes. The text discusses actions that invalidate the prayer. Things like talking, eating, drinking, laughing, or turning away from the Qibla intentionally.
Okay.
These actions break the focus and concentration that's required for the prayer.
It's a reminder to be mindful of our actions, right? And to treat the prayer with the reverence it deserves.
Exactly.
But what about unintentional actions? Can those invalidate our prayer too?
Yes, even unintentional actions can sometimes invalidate the prayer.
Okay.
That's why it's so important to be attentive and to try to minimize those distractions. And if you do realize you've made a mistake, the text provides guidance on how to correct it.
Okay. That's helpful to know.
Yeah.
It's like having a roadmap, right? For navigating those moments of forgetfulness or error. It shows that Islam is compassionate, offering solutions even when we stumble.
Absolutely.
Now, aside from the actions themselves, right? The text also mentions the importance of what we wear during prayer. So why is that? Why is that significant?
Well, our clothing can reflect our inner state and our level of respect for God.
Okay.
The text discourages praying in silk or excessively embellished garments.
Okay.
It's about approaching God with humility and simplicity,
Okay.
not with ostentation.
Okay.
It also advises against praying in something you'd be ashamed to wear in public.
Right. It's like choosing clothing that reflects the sacredness
Right.
of the act of prayer.
Exactly.
What about shoes? Are we allowed to pray with shoes on?
The text says that it is permissible
Okay.
if your shoes are clean and there's no fear of impurity.
Okay.
But it also notes that the prophet preferred praying barefoot.
Good.
It's seen as a sign of humility, placing your feet directly on the ground in surrender to God.
Okay.
So while shoes are allowed, barefoot is considered more virtuous.
So it's about striving for that extra level of reverence, even in the smallest details.
Absolutely.
The text also talks about choosing a suitable prayer rug.
Yeah.
Why is that important?
Well, the prayer rug creates a dedicated space for prayer. It's like this visual and symbolic boundary that separates you from the world and allows you to focus on your connection with God. And the text recommends choosing a clean, simple rug, avoiding anything too luxurious or distractingly beautiful.
Okay.
Again, it's about prioritizing that humility and focus.
That makes sense. It's about creating that sacred space, both internally and externally.
Absolutely.
Speaking of, creating a prayer space,
Right.
the text also mentions this concept of sutra,
Right.
a barrier that's placed in front of the person praying.
Right, in front of the person praying.
Why is that recommended?
Well, the sutra helps minimize distractions and it enhances your focus. It can be something as simple as a stick
Okay.
or even a line drawn on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And it creates a visual reminder that you're entering a dedicated space for prayer.
Interesting.
Interestingly enough, the Prophet often used a sutra even in the mosque.
So it's like creating this this personal bubble of concentration,
Right.
even within a communal space.
Exactly.
It shows that focus and intention are so important, regardless of of where you're praying.
Absolutely.
Now we've talked about what to wear, where to pray, even what to place in front of us. But the text also emphasizes the importance of where we don't pray.
Right.
So what were some of those locations that were mentioned?
Well, it discourages praying in certain places, like a sheep pen, for example.
Okay.
It's about choosing clean and respectful locations. You can pray in a marketplace, for example, but find a clean, secluded spot. It's about finding that balance, honoring the sanctity of prayer while adapting to the realities of life.
So it's not about rigid rules,
Right.
but about thoughtful consideration.
Exactly.
Yeah, it makes me think about how adaptable prayer is.
It is.
You can pray almost anywhere,
Right.
as long as you approach it with the right intention.
Exactly.
But are there any circumstances where where prayer might be suspended or adapted?
Absolutely. The text addresses prayer during travel, illness, and for women during menstruation or postpartum bleeding. In these situations, Islam offers flexibility.
Okay.
So, for example, during travel, you can shorten and combine certain prayers.
Okay.
And if you're ill and can't stand, you can pray sitting or even lying down.
That's a beautiful example of how Islam prioritizes compassion,
Right.
and practicality. It's not about making things unnecessarily difficult.
Right.
But it's about finding ways to stay connected with God no matter the circumstance.
Absolutely.
It's like saying, your well-being matters and God understands.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that even when we're facing challenges, maintaining that connection with God through prayer can bring immense peace and comfort.
That's such a powerful reminder. It's like having that anchor, that source of strength, no matter what storms life throws our way.
Exactly.
Now, before we move on to the next part of our deep dive, I want to touch on something that you mentioned earlier: the importance of understanding the meaning of what we recite during prayer. Can you expand on that a bit?
Of course, prayer shouldn't be just about reciting words without understanding their meaning.
Right.
The text encourages reflecting on those words and seeking their deeper significance. It even recommends learning the translation of the Quran and the supplications.
So it's like the difference between, reading a beautiful poem in a language you don't understand.
Yes.
And truly grasping its beauty and its depth.
Exactly. It transforms prayer from a rote ritual into a heart-to-heart conversation with God.
I love that image, a heart-to-heart conversation with God. That's a beautiful way to think about prayer. Now, before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to ask you a personal question.
Okay.
What role has prayer played in your life beyond just fulfilling a religious obligation?
That's a question that deserves its own dedicated reflection. Let's explore that in part 3 of our deep dive.
We've been unpacking so much about the how of prayer, the rituals, the rulings, the etiquette.
Right.
But I'm really interested to hear more about the why for you. What does prayer mean to you personally?
It's a question I've pondered a lot over the years, and prayer for me has become like a refuge, a source of strength, a way to navigate the ups and downs of life.
Yeah.
It's that constant connection to something bigger than myself.
It's like that direct line to God.
Right.
That we were talking about before.
Yeah.
Do you remember any specific times when prayer felt particularly powerful?
Oh, yeah.
Or meaningful for you?
There have been many.
Okay.
I recall times of great difficulty, moments of grief and uncertainty, and where turning to prayer brought a sense of peace and clarity that I couldn't find anywhere else.
Yeah.
It was like surrendering my worries and anxieties, knowing that even if I didn't have the answers, God did.
That surrender is so powerful, isn't it?
It is.
It's acknowledging that we're not in control, but that there's this this higher power guiding us,
Right.
even when we can't see the way.
Right. And trusting in that.
Yeah.
Trusting in that wisdom.
Yeah. Have you experienced that in your own life?
Absolutely. There have been times where I felt, lost and confused, and prayer became my compass,
Okay.
guiding me back to a sense of purpose and direction.
Yeah.
It's like that verse in the Quran, verily in the remembrance of God do hearts find rest. Prayer for me is that remembrance.
It's beautiful how you describe it.
Thank you.
It makes me think about how prayer isn't just about asking for things,
Right.
but it's about cultivating that inner peace and connection.
Mm-hmm.
Even when life is chaotic.
Yes, absolutely.
The text that we've been exploring, it emphasizes this importance of ihsan,
Yes.
right? That's striving for excellence in prayer.
Mm-hmm.
How do you connect that concept to your own experience?
Well, for me, Sanan is about bring my whole heart to prayer.
Okay.
It's about being fully present, aware of God's presence, and striving to perform the prayer with the utmost sincerity and humility.
Right.
It's a constant work in progress.
Yeah.
But the more I focus on cultivating Ihsan, the more fulfilling and transformative the experience becomes.
It's a reminder that prayer isn't a destination,
Right.
but a journey, right?
That journey.
It's about that continuous effort to improve, to deepen our connection
Yes.
with God.
Yeah.
You mentioned that your understanding of prayer has evolved over time.
It has.
So what advice would you give someone who's just beginning their journey with prayer?
I would say be patient with yourself.
Okay.
Don't get overwhelmed by the details or feel discouraged if your mind wanders or if you make mistakes.
Okay.
The most important thing is to approach prayer with sincerity and a genuine desire to connect with God.
Okay.
Start with the basics, build consistency, and gradually deepen your understanding.
It's like learning any new skill, right?
Absolutely.
It takes time and practice.
It does.
And it's okay to start small,
Mm-hmm.
to focus on those fundamentals,
Right.
and gradually build from there.
Yeah.
What about resources? What advice would you give to someone looking for guidance and support in their journey with prayer?
Well, there are so many wonderful resources available. Seek out knowledgeable scholars or teachers in your community.
Right.
Explore books and online lectures that resonate with you.
Mm-hmm.
And don't underestimate the power of connecting with other Muslims who are also on their prayer journeys.
Yeah.
Sharing experiences and supporting each other can make a huge difference.
It's like having that community to lean on, right?
Exactly.
To share those those struggles and triumphs, that shared journey.
Yeah. Speaking of community, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the role of congregational prayer. We talked about its importance earlier.
Yes.
But how has it impacted your own relationship with prayer? Praying in congregation has this unique energy and power to it.
Okay.
It's about standing shoulder to shoulder with your brothers and sisters, united in your submission to God.
Okay.
It strengthens those community bonds. It reminds us of our shared purpose. And it really amplifies that feeling of connection.
Yeah, it's like that feeling of unity and collective energy that you get at a concert or a sporting event,
Right.
but magnified by the spiritual dimension. It's really special.
It is.
Now, as we approach the end of our deep dive into Sunan al Tirmidhi,
Okay.
what final thoughts or reflections would you like to share with our listeners?
I think what's most important to remember is that prayer is a gift. It's a source of immense blessings and benefits. It's a way to connect with the divine, to find peace and solace, to seek guidance and strength, and to cultivate a deeper awareness of God's presence in our lives. Yeah.
So embrace it wholeheartedly, explore its depths, and allow it to transform your heart.
That's beautifully said.
Thank you.
It's a reminder that prayer is not a burden,
Right.
but a privilege, a source of joy and connection.
Absolutely.
So to our listeners, we encourage you to keep exploring this richness of Islamic teachings on prayer. Continue seeking knowledge, refining your practice, and deepening your connection with God.
Absolutely.
May your prayers be a source of peace, guidance, and strength on your spiritual journey.
And remember, the journey of prayer is a lifelong one. Embrace the challenges, celebrate the triumphs, and never stop seeking to improve May God bless your efforts and guide you on your path.